The city was alive with its usual midday rhythm, the kind of rhythm that made the sidewalks pulse and the traffic lights feel almost irrelevant. Horns blared, heels clicked against concrete, and the towering glass offices reflected the harsh glare of the noon sun. But amid the chaos, on a corner near the corporate towers, stood a humble food truck with the word Sunrise Bites painted across its faded blue exterior. Inside that truck, 25-year-old Emma Collins was working with the quiet intensity of someone who had no choice but to keep going. Her white t-shirt clung to her from the heat inside, and a ponytail kept stray strands of blonde hair out of her tired eyes. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her arm, then leaned forward and called out, "Order up," to a waiting customer. For the past 4 hours she had been running on sheer endurance, taking orders, slicing ingredients, wrapping sandwiches, pouring drinks, everything that kept the line moving. And the line never seemed to end. It curled around the block now, filled with office workers in pressed suits and polished shoes who wanted quick food before diving back into their air-conditioned offices. Emma had no such luxury. Her world was grease, heat, and the endless sound of impatient voices. But this truck was not just a job. It was her father's dream. 2 years ago, cancer had taken him quickly, leaving Emma with more than just grief. He had left her this food truck, along with the responsibility of raising her younger brother, Noah, who was finishing his last year of high school. At first, Emma thought about selling it, about escaping the constant grind of early mornings, late nights, and endless paperwork. But every time she looked at the truck, she remembered her father's voice. "Good food brings people together, Emma. Honest work will never betray you." So she stayed. And she worked. Every single day. "Next in line," she shouted, her voice carrying across the steady hum of the crowd. Near the back of the line stood a man who didn't quite blend in with the others, though at first glance, he appeared to be just another well-dressed customer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored navy suit that seemed too fine for this street corner. His dark hair was slicked neatly, and his polished shoes reflected the light as though he had stepped out of a magazine spread. This was Marcus Blackwell, 32 years old, CEO of Blackwell Development, and a name that carried weight in the city's business circles. People whispered about his deals, his empire, the sharp rise of his company. To strangers, he was the image of untouchable success. To those who knew him, he was decisive, relentless, intimidating. But today he stood quietly, checking his phone, waiting in the heat just like everyone else. When he finally reached the front, Emma barely looked up. To her, he was just another suit in line. Efficiency was survival during lunch rush, and she did not waste smiles on men who probably earned more in an hour than she did in a week. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her tone polite but rehearsed. Marcus studied the menu board for a moment, but his eyes kept drifting back to her. Something about her face tugged at him, stirring memories he couldn't quite pin down. "I'll take the grilled chicken sandwich and a lemonade," he said. "That'll be $12. She reached for the bread, sliding into practiced movements. He handed her the money, and as their fingers brushed, he finally caught a proper look at her eyes. Recognition struck him so suddenly that it felt like someone had punched the air from his lungs. "Still remember me?" His voice was quiet, low enough that only she could hear it. Emma froze. The bread knife in her hand hovered mid-air as her eyes snapped to his. The suit, the polish, the commanding aura, it had disguised him. But those eyes, those warm brown eyes, soft in contrast to his intimidating presence, pulled her 15 years back into a memory she had never forgotten. "Marcus?" she whispered, disbelief dripping from her tone. "Marcus Blackwell?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "Hello, Emma. I wondered if I'd ever see you again." For a moment, the food truck, the line of restless customers, even the blazing sun, all of it vanished. Emma wasn't a tired young woman running a food truck anymore. She was 17 again, standing in the crowded high school cafeteria, tray in hand, watching a boy sit alone at a corner table while the rest of the school buzzed around him. He had been awkward then, tall but hunched, with glasses that slid down his nose and notebooks filled with scribbles he never shared. Emma had been captain of the debate team, one of the bright ones headed toward a promising future. She could have chosen any table. But something in Marcus's quiet loneliness pulled at her. And so one day she sat across from him. "You probably don't remember," Marcus said now, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "But you used to eat lunch with me when no one else would." Her throat tightened. "Of course I remember," she replied. "You were working on that novel about the boy who could talk to trees." His chest lifted, relief and wonder flickering across his face. "You actually remember?" She did. She remembered him reading awkwardly written chapters aloud, his words stumbling but his eyes alight with dreams. She remembered sharing her sandwich when he forgot his lunch, laughing with him over silly jokes no one else heard. She remembered the fragile way he had smiled when she treated him like a person who mattered. And now, standing before her, was that same boy transformed. The line of customers shifted impatiently, and a man behind him cleared his throat loudly. "Some of us have meetings," he snapped. Emma blinked, the spell breaking. She turned quickly, wrapping up Marcus's sandwich, pouring his lemonade, sliding the items across the counter. "Here you go," she said briskly, though her hands trembled. Marcus accepted the food, but instead of leaving, he stepped to the side, waiting as the line thinned and eventually disappeared. Emma worked quickly, her mind spinning, her heart pounding. When the last customer had left and silence finally settled around the truck, Marcus returned to the window. "Emma," he said gently, "can we talk? Really talk?" She hesitated. The weight of her day pressed down on her, exhaustion tugging at her shoulders. But curiosity flickered inside her, an ember she couldn't extinguish. "I only have a few minutes before I prep for the dinner shift," she murmured. "Then let me help," Marcus replied, shrugging off his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves. His voice carried a memory with it. "I remember you teaching me how to clean tables at your dad's restaurant. Let me return the favor." For the first time in years, Emma laughed, tired but genuine, as the past and present collided in ways she never imagined possible. Marcus slipped off his suit jacket and draped it carefully over a nearby chair. The contrast of his expensive cufflinks against the grease-stained counters of the food truck was almost comical. Yet there was no hesitation in his movements. He rolled up his sleeves and stepped inside the cramped truck as though he had belonged there all along. Emma raised an eyebrow but said nothing, handing him a rag. "Wipe down the counter." "Start there," she instructed, her voice carrying a faint amusement. He obeyed without protest, carefully moving containers aside and scrubbing the stainless steel until it gleamed. Emma watched him out of the corner of her eye, torn between disbelief and curiosity. This was Marcus Blackwell, a man she had read about in the business section of the newspaper. A man whose signature could change the fate of entire neighborhoods. And here he was, wiping mustard stains off her food truck counter. "You really do remember my dad's restaurant," she said after a moment, her tone softer. "Of course I do," Marcus replied. "I remember how proud he looked when you worked beside him. And I remember you showing me how to carry 2 trays at once without dropping them." Emma froze, her chest tightening with emotion. That memory was like a shard of glass lodged in her heart. Her father's laughter, his booming voice, his constant encouragement, they were all gone now, leaving only echoes in her mind. "He loved this truck," she whispered. "Said it was freedom. A kitchen on wheels, a way to bring food to people who needed it most." Marcus looked at her with quiet respect. "And you've kept that dream alive." Emma shook her head. "Barely. Some days it feels like I'm drowning in permits and inspections and bills. The chains are everywhere now. They can afford flashy marketing campaigns and prime locations. I'm just one truck trying to survive." Marcus set the rag down and leaned against the counter, his gaze fixed on her. "Emma, you've always been more than just anything. When we were kids, you were the only one who saw me. Everyone else thought I was invisible. You didn't." His words stirred something deep inside her. She remembered those days vividly, Marcus sitting alone, scribbling stories in his notebook while others mocked him from afar. She remembered how fragile his confidence had been, how much effort it had taken for him to look her in the eye when she encouraged him. "You kept writing?" she asked suddenly, needing to know. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I never stopped. I've published 3 novels now, under a pen name. They're not bestsellers but they're out there. Words on paper, stories that belong to the world instead of just to me." Emma blinked in surprise. "You actually did it." "I did it because of you," he said simply. "You told me I had potential when no one else did." She felt her throat tighten. Memories flooded back, afternoons in the cafeteria, whispered encouragements, the way Marcus's eyes had lit up whenever she praised his writing. She had never realized how much those moments had meant to him. Before she could respond, Marcus picked up a box of napkins and began stacking them neatly. "Tell me about you. About everything I missed." For the next hour, Emma worked while Marcus helped, and she spoke in fragments, about her father's sudden illness, the crushing weight of responsibility that had fallen on her shoulders, the long hours she worked to keep both the truck and her brother afloat. She spoke of Noah's dreams of going to college, of her own uncertainty about whether she could keep the business alive long enough to see him graduate. Marcus listened with an intensity that made her uneasy, as though every word was being etched into his memory. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply listened. When she finished restocking the soda fridge, he finally spoke. Emma, I want to ask you something. And I need you to hear me out before you say no. She gave him a wary look. That sounds dangerous. It's not dangerous. It's opportunity. Her brows furrowed. Go on. My company, Blackwell Development, we've been exploring investments in food service. I've got a new mixed-use project in the works. Retail, residential, office space. What we need is a food anchor. Something authentic. Something people trust. He paused, his gaze steady. I want that to be you. Emma blinked. Then laughed, short, disbelieving. Marcus, I can barely afford my truck's permits. Do you know what rent costs in one of your buildings? I'd be bankrupt in a month. You wouldn't pay rent. Her laughter died. What? You'd be an equity partner. We'd provide the space, the equipment, the marketing. You'd bring the vision, the recipes, the heart. We'd build it together. Emma stared at him as though he had lost his mind. You want to go into business with me? I want to invest in someone who once invested in me, Marcus said firmly. Back then you gave me something priceless, belief in myself. Now I want to give you the same thing. Her chest tightened, her heart pulling in two directions at once. She wanted to believe him. But the weight of reality pressed down harder. Marcus, this isn't high school anymore. This is real money. Real responsibility. I know, he said. His voice was steady, grounded. In high school you believed in an awkward boy who didn't fit anywhere. Now, I believe in the woman who took her father's dream and kept it alive against impossible odds. Emma swallowed hard, her throat aching with unspoken emotions. Why would you do this for me? Marcus's eyes softened. Because 15 years ago you sat at my table when you could have sat anywhere else. You made me feel like I mattered. And that kindness changed the trajectory of my entire life. Success isn't just about making money, Emma. It's about lifting the people who once lifted you. The truck was quiet now, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Emma turned away, blinking back tears. She wasn't ready to give him an answer. Not yet. But for the first time in years she felt something stir within her, a possibility. A spark. The days that followed were a blur for Emma. She went through her usual motions, rising before dawn, prepping ingredients, firing up the grill, but Marcus's words echoed through every corner of her mind. Equity partner. No rent. Build it together. Sounded too good to be true. She had learned the hard way that promises rarely survived reality. And yet, every time she caught herself doubting, she remembered his eyes when he spoke, steady, unwavering, filled with the same sincerity she had seen in high school when he first dared to read her a page from his notebook. On the third day, Marcus appeared again at the truck. This time, he wasn't in a tailored navy suit. He wore jeans, a crisp shirt, and sneakers, his hair casually styled. He looked less like the powerful CEO splashed across the business magazines and more like the boy she used to know. Morning, he said, stepping up to the counter before the lunch rush began. Emma wiped her hands on her apron. Back for another grilled chicken sandwich? He smiled. Back to see if you've thought about my offer. Emma sighed. Marcus, I run a food truck. I don't even have a proper accounting system, unless you count a shoebox filled with receipts. What you're talking about, it's a different world. Then let me bring you into that world, he replied gently. You don't have to do it alone. His words made her chest ache. Doing it alone had become her identity, her shield. She had carried her father's dream alone, carried her brother's future alone, carried her grief alone. To let someone in, it was terrifying. I can't make a decision like this overnight, she said firmly. Marcus nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. But at least let me show you what it could look like. Tomorrow come with me. No commitments, no strings. Just see it. Emma hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. Fine. Tomorrow. The next morning Marcus arrived in a sleek black car. Emma climbed in awkwardly, her apron replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. She kept her arms folded across her chest, as though bracing herself for disappointment. They drove across the city until the skyscrapers gave way to a massive construction site. Steel beams rose against the skyline, cranes swung overhead, and workers in hard hats shouted directions as machinery roared to life. Marcus led her through the site, his voice steady. This will be the Blackwell Plaza. Mixed use with residential towers, retail shops, green spaces, and office wings. But at the center here will be the anchor restaurant. A place where people gather. A place that defines the space. He stopped in front of a glass-walled corner still under construction. I want this to be Sunrise Cafe. Emma stared at the vast open space, her breath catching. It was nothing like her truck, roomy, filled with light, endless possibilities. But her first thought wasn't of potential, was of fear. "This is too big," she whispered. "I'm one person with one truck. I can't fill a place like this." Marcus turned to her, his expression calm but firm. "Emma, you're not just one person with one truck. You're the heart of something real. People line up for blocks just to eat your food. Not because it's convenient, but because it's honest. Because it feels like home." She looked away, tears threatening. "What if I fail?" "Then you fail," Marcus said without hesitation. "And you get back up. Failure isn't the end. It's the beginning of something better. I should know. My first development deal nearly bankrupted me. But I learned and I built again." Emma studied him, the truth in his words settling into her. This wasn't pity. This wasn't charity. It was belief, raw, unshakable belief in her. Back at the food truck that evening, Noah noticed the distant look in his sister's eyes. "You're thinking about something," he said, unwrapping his sandwich. Emma hesitated. Marcus Blackwell came by again. Noah nearly choked. "The Marcus Blackwell? The billionaire guy? What does he want with us?" "He wants me to open a restaurant with him. Sunrise Cafe." Noah's eyes widened. "Emma, that's huge. Why would you even hesitate?" "Because it's risky. Because if it fails, I don't just lose a truck. I lose everything." Noah leaned forward, his voice firm. "You've already given me everything. You worked yourself into the ground so I could have a chance at college. If anyone deserves a chance at more, it's you. Dad would have wanted this." Emma's throat tightened. She had carried her brother's future on her back for years, but hearing his confidence in her, it felt like a weight lifted. The following week, Emma found herself sitting across from Marcus in his office, sunlight pouring across the polished mahogany desk. Documents lay spread before her, partnership terms, projected costs, revenue shares. It all felt surreal. "I'll handle the permits, the build-out, the finances," Marcus explained. "You handle the recipes, the staff, the customer experience. We play to our strengths." Emma traced the edge of the papers nervously. "Why me? You could partner with any celebrity chef in the city." "Because none of them sat with me when I was a nobody," Marcus said softly. "None of them gave me the belief to become who I am. You did. And now I want to return that belief." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of choice pressing down. She could keep clinging to the truck, to the safe and familiar, or she could step into something bigger, scarier, but potentially life-changing. Finally, she opened her eyes. "Okay. Let's do it." Marcus's face broke into a rare, genuine smile. "Welcome to the partnership, Emma Collins." That night, after locking up the food truck, Emma stood alone under the glow of the streetlights. The truck had been her shield, her anchor, her survival. But now it would also be her beginning. For the first time in years, she let herself believe in something more than survival. She let herself believe in possibility. And as she looked at the skyline, she whispered into the night, "Dad, I hope I'm doing the right thing." Somewhere deep inside she felt the answer. 6 months later, the grand opening of Sunrise Cafe filled the city with a quiet buzz. The once empty corner of Blackwell Plaza now glowed with warm lights spilling through tall glass windows. Inside, the cafe was a blend of rustic charm and modern elegance. Wooden tables carried the scent of fresh polish, walls displayed framed photos of the food truck's humble beginnings, and the air itself was alive with the aroma of roasted herbs, sizzling meats, and freshly baked bread. Emma stood in the middle of it all, her apron crisp and clean, her hair tied neatly back. But this time she wasn't just the tired girl running orders in a cramped truck. She was the owner and head of a flourishing restaurant. Marcus had kept his word. He had handled the paperwork, the investors, the construction. He had poured resources into the dream without once trying to overshadow her role. And Emma had done the rest. She had crafted menus that told stories, dishes that reminded people of home, flavors that drew in strangers and turned them into regulars. On the opening day alone, the line stretched down the block just as it had outside the food truck, but this time there was room for everyone. Families gathered, office workers lingered, and neighbors marveled at how the space already felt like part of the community. Behind the counter, Emma worked with her staff, 15 employees who now relied on her leadership, 15 people whose paychecks gave them stability because she had dared to take a risk. Her younger brother, Noah, was there too, proudly bussing tables during his college break, telling anyone who would listen that this cafe had been built on his sister's determination. When the crowd finally thinned in the late evening, Emma found herself at a table near the window with Marcus. The glow of the city skyline reflected off the glass, casting a soft light over his features. He wasn't here as a CEO tonight. He was here as Marcus, the boy she had once shared sandwiches with, the man who had chosen to believe in her when she could barely believe in herself. "You did it," he said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. Emma shook her head, smiling faintly. "We did it." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with memory. She thought of her father, of long days when she had nearly given up, of nights spent worrying if her choices were enough. She thought of Marcus at that lonely cafeteria table, scribbling words no one cared to hear until she had chosen to sit beside him. "You know," Marcus said, leaning back, "when I signed my first deal, people said I was lucky. But I knew it wasn't luck. It was because someone had once made me believe I could do something more. That belief changes everything. And that someone was you." Emma felt her throat tighten, but this time she didn't hide the tears. They weren't tears of exhaustion or despair. They were tears of release, of gratitude, of finally seeing her father's dream expanded into something even greater than he had imagined. "Why me, Marcus?" she whispered. "Why not someone else?" He smiled, the kind of smile that carried both history and truth. "Because sometimes the people who change our lives when we're young are the only ones we want beside us when we build something that matters. You gave me courage when I had none. Now I want to give you every chance to succeed." Emma placed her hand on the table, fingers brushing against the polished wood. "Then I guess we're even." "No," Marcus replied softly. "We're not even. We're just getting started." Weeks turned into months, and Sunrise Cafe became more than just a restaurant. It became a gathering place. Couples celebrated anniversaries there. Students studied late into the night over plates of pasta. Families came on Sundays, bringing laughter that echoed off the walls. The truck still operated, parked in familiar neighborhoods, but now it was a symbol of where it had all begun, not the limit of where it could go. For Emma, life no longer felt like survival. It felt like growth. She still worked hard, still bore the weight of responsibility, but now she carried it alongside someone who believed in her just as much as she believed in him. One evening, as she locked up the cafe, Marcus stood beside her, looking out at the glowing city. "Funny," he murmured, "how one lunch table can change everything." Emma nodded, her heart full. Sometimes the smallest kindness plants the strongest roots. And together they stepped out into the night, not as the lonely boy and the popular girl from high school, not as the struggling food truck worker and the untouchable CEO, but as partners, bound by a kindness that had refused to die, and a dream that had only just begun to rise.